In this video, we'll talk about food sources, deficiency symptoms, and toxicity symptoms for fat-soluble vitamins. I'm going to take you through a series of case studies and give you an opportunity to think through this and what deficiency it might be, which vitamin deficiency it might be. Here's our first one. Susie notices she cannot adapt well to dark light after a bright flash, such as when driving on the road at night. What is the vitamin deficiency? Vitamin A, vitamin D, or vitamin E? Hopefully you remember from the reading that this is related to vitamin A, and if you think about its function is within vision. So this will have, if you're not getting enough vitamin A, then you can potentially have vision, especially in low light. So what is the deficiency name? This one is night blindness. And it can lead to xerophthalmia and eventually blindness. So this page here, I want to take you just through how a deficiency develops. This is not on the test, but this is just really information for you to have an understanding of how deficiencies might develop gradually. What does that look like? This example is with vitamin A. It'll be very similar with other vitamins. So first, you're going to see inadequate dietary intake. Then you're going to see tissue reserves of a nutrient, if it is stored in the body, would go down. In the case of vitamin A, it is stored in the body, so we see that the storage goes down in the liver. We see decreased blood levels of the nutrients, in this case, decreased vitamin A blood levels. And then, of course, the cells would not have the nutrient as available as much to them to use. In this case, with vitamin A, cells in the eye would not have the vitamin A they need, so it leads to impairment of vision. This leads to impaired cellular function. So this would be, in the case of vitamin A deficiency, we'd see impaired ability to see in dim light. This can lead then to physical signs and symptoms of deficiency. So in this case, with vitamin A deficiency, you can see the cornea in the eye can dries out. It can be thickened and be susceptible to infection. And like I mentioned, there can be long-term impairment. In some vitamin deficiency, it can lead to death. In the example of vitamin A, we can see that the cornea continues to dry out and thicken, and proteins will accumulate. This can lead to hardening and blindness. And this is showing you a picture from your book, what this might look like. Sometimes students will ask, are deficiencies reversible? And it really depends on the stage of where you intervene. So in this case, if you didn't catch it until stage 7, well, the damage is going to be done. If you can catch it earlier, where we're just starting to see some impairment in cellular function, we can actually administer the vitamin, and we can start seeing it those negative effects go away. And whether or not you can intervene here, but if there's any damage that's been done, you're not going to reverse that. So thinking of night blindness, what food would you recommend to address this deficiency? So would you recommend grains, sweet potatoes, or fish? Hopefully with vitamin A, you think of carrots, which are deep orange. And so sweet potatoes are also deep orange, thus they are very high in vitamin A. So actually any fruit or vegetable that is deep orange is going to be a good source of vitamin A, specifically beta-carotene, the plant form of vitamin A. And the other generality I would say is dark leafy greens and deep orange fruits and vegetables are good sources of vitamin A. So this is actually a true story here. This was published in the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's newsroom in 2013. So let's read this scenario and then you think about what the deficiency might be. So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Tennessee Department of Health have identified a cluster of newborns in Tennessee with late this nutrient deficiency bleeding. 3 of the infants had bleeding within the brain, and the 4th had gastrointestinal bleeding between February and September 2013. The newborn parents declined this nutrient injection at birth, mainly because they were unaware of the health benefits of this nutrient at birth. So what is the vitamin deficiency related to this? And hopefully you think about each of these nutrients and what their key functions are in the body, as that will really help you to understand what would happen if you didn't get enough of it. Hopefully the bleeding gave you clued you into thinking about blood clotting factors and vitamin K's involvement in that. So the deficiency is related to a vitamin K deficiency. And this is true. We do, when babies are born, they need vitamin K. And if they don't get it, they're going to potentially have issues with blood clotting and have a bleeding disorder, and it can happen in the brain, just like this case showed, and also the GI tract. So we really want to encourage parents to make sure that their newborns are getting that vitamin K shot. So what food could a person add to their diet to increase vitamin K intake? Would you say cabbage, apple, or chicken? Now, of course, none of these foods are going to be given to an infant. That's why we need to make sure they get it through other sources that are appropriate for their age. But if your adult wants to get more vitamin K, what would they consume of these three things? And the answer is cabbage. So cabbage is a good source of vitamin K. Here's our next deficiency scenario. And we also see an image here from your book of someone who's experiencing this deficiency. So in a pediatric clinic, some toddlers are noted to have bowed legs, rickety rosary by the ribs, and other abnormal bone growth. It is also determined that the children get very little sunlight and that the household has limited economic resources. So the bowed legs, you can see here, even in this older child, you can see the bowing of the legs rather than straight. So what is the vitamin deficiency? And I'd say again here, think about the functions of each of these vitamins. Hopefully you think of vitamin D with bones. So vitamin D is essential for bone development. What is the deficiency name? The name of this deficiency is rickets. So vitamin D deficiency is rickets in children, and in adults we see it as osteomalacia. So on this last slide, you saw that they were getting very little sunlight. Well, why does that matter? Well, we actually are able to produce vitamin D through exposure to the sun, which is quite interesting. So the sun hits our skin. We have actually a form of cholesterol in our skin that then, through a process in the liver and the kidneys, it becomes active vitamin D in the body, and it can act in its roles there. So your book's showing a picture of someone in the sun. And someone who is lighter skin won't need to be out in the sun as long as much or as long of a period of time as someone who has darker skin. So someone who has darker skin, it's going to take a longer period of time for the sun to penetrate in a way that allows vitamin D to be activated. And what are factors that affect sun exposure? So think about what you do to protect yourself from getting too much sun, because that's also a high risk for skin cancer. So we have to balance that. And what we're talking about with vitamin D exposure is even just your hands being exposed, and someone who has lighter skin tone would be maybe around 15 minutes of sun exposure. And the other thing I would say is time of year as well. So depending on the time of year depends on how the sun is penetrating into the atmosphere and how it's going to affect vitamin D production. So we know in Utah, about from November to about March or so, that's really the time frame when we're not going to be producing significant amounts of vitamin D through sunlight. The other months, though, we can produce quite a bit as we need. And we also store vitamin D in the body, so that's helpful. But we probably still need to make sure we're getting it in our diet during those winter months as well. So think about other things that might affect sun exposure. Well, to prevent skin cancer, we use sunscreen. And a lot of times lotions or makeups will have sunscreen in them. So you may be putting something on you without even realizing it has sunscreen in it, which is great to protect us from skin cancer, but it prevents the sun penetrating through for vitamin D to be activated through sunlight. Anything else that keeps the sun from being able to penetrate your skin is going to reduce your ability to produce vitamin D. So things like a cloudy day, if you're in a car and there's a window up, that's going to block from the sun. If you're wearing longer sleeve clothing or covering yourself, that's going to reduce the ability to produce vitamin D. And if you live in the city with tall buildings, again, reduce exposure to sunlight. So all of those things really can affect whether or not we're going to be able to have sufficient vitamin D through sunlight. And as I mentioned, we really probably do need to get in our diet as well. So thinking about that, and I should say in our diet, especially in those winter months, but having all year round, it can be a good thing as well. So what foods would you recommend to address this deficiency? Would you recommend beef and chicken, fruits, or dairy foods? Well, in the United States, most of us are going to get it in a fortified form through dairy foods. Now, if you were years ago, and you might even be able to still find it now, they'd give kids cod liver oil, which could be a source of vitamin D. But now we have it fortified into food supply, especially so all milk, regardless of its percent milk fat, so whole milk, 2%, 1%, non-fat milk or fat-free milk, they all have vitamin D added to it, along with vitamin A. When it comes to yogurts, not all yogurts actually are fortified with vitamin D, so you have to look at the label to see whether or not the kind you have is fortified with vitamin D, especially if you don't drink any kind of fortified cow's milk or fortified other types of milk like soy milk, and you're getting most of your dairy foods from yogurt, then you want to look at that. And just so you know, natural cheeses really are quite low in vitamin D, so they're not a great source. So dairy foods really are best in milk, and then also fortified into the ones that are fortified in yogurt, and you can get it fortified into grains as well, sometimes like cereals. This one is just for you to think about with vitamin E food sources. So which one of these could a person add to their diet to increase vitamin E intake? Sunflower seeds, an apple, or a baked potato? And the answer is sunflower seeds. So sometimes I like to add sunflower seeds to my salad, and I know that I'm boosting my vitamin E intake. Okay, here's another scenario based on a real person. So this was published quite a while ago in New England Journal of Medicine, 2002. A 23-year-old woman who was admitted for jaundice was found to have yellow-orange discoloration of her skin. Her sclera, which means the whites of her eyes, were not discolored. The serum bilirubin level was normal. High-performance liquid chromatography showed a marked increase in this vitamin toxicity levels. The patient was a vegetarian and had been eating a low-calorie diet with a high content of orange juice, pumpkin, and carrots. This one is a couple of things. So they looked at serum bilirubin to make sure that it wasn't something with liver function, and also that she didn't have jaundice. Jaundice would indicate you'd see yellow in the sclera or the whites of the eye, and then you can see serum bilirubin levels high. That indicates that it's related to jaundice. But because those things were not there, and the discoloration of her skin was really based on her diet. So the question is what is the vitamin, in this case, toxicity? So this is toxicity of a vitamin. Well, with the image here and the description in this case study, hopefully you go right to vitamin A. So specifically though, this is beta carotene. So this is the form that's found in plants. What we do know is that the plant form of vitamin A, beta carotene, really doesn't pose too much of a risk. It doesn't pose a great risk when consumed in high amounts because you're getting it from food and it just doesn't act the same way in the body. The body's able to make it so that it's not going to be harmful. So really, someone who consumes a high beta carotene diet, so high plant-based diet like a vegetarian, really it's not going to have any health concerns other than it changes the skin orange because of what's happening with where the pigments are being deposited in the fat layer underneath the skin. But as far as health, no concerns. What about this one? So this is also thinking about vitamin toxicity. So members of an English expedition shot a bear, and on the following day, a stew was prepared from the liver, heart, and kidneys. And specifically, it was a polar bear. Why? There's a picture here, and also that picture's from your book. The 19 men who partook of the stew all became sick. They had the symptoms described were sluggishness, irritability, severe headache, vomiting, and skin peeling. What is the vitamin toxicity here? Vitamin A, folate, or vitamin C? So the toxicity here is actually vitamin A. It's not from the plant form of vitamin A, but it's actually from an animal source, so from the polar bear. So this is a different type of vitamin A, and this one we do have concerns. It can have some negative effects that actually can lead to all of these symptoms that are listed here, and in some cases can lead to death. So the form you get vitamin A in is really important. If you're getting it from plant sources, no problem if it's high. If you're getting it from sources like liver, then you have to be really careful about how much you're eating, especially if you're getting it from polar bear liver, which I doubt very many of you will, but even beef liver, which is a little more common, still has high amounts. You don't want to consume it very often. Another toxicity. So this one is probably more common where we see toxicity, which is where people are taking high dose supplements of nutrients. We definitely want to make sure that people stay around 100% of the daily value within supplement recommendations. So here's an example of someone who has taken 50,000 IU daily supplement of this particular nutrient for 15 years. And a blood sample indicates that this person has high blood calcium levels. Toxicity of this nutrient can also lead to calcification of soft tissue such as the heart, kidneys, and arteries. What is the vitamin toxicity? In this case, the toxicity is vitamin D. So we've talked about vitamin D is important for calcium absorption, but if you have super high doses, which 50,000 IU is a very high dose, it's above the UL, and you're consuming it consistently, it's very likely that you'll start seeing toxicity symptoms. So we definitely do not recommend that individuals consume a supplement over 100% of the daily value, and really try to get your nutrients from food. Oh, and another note here is that toxicity of vitamin D does not happen from overexposure to sunlight. Now, skin cancer does, but the body has a mechanism in place that will, that if you've been in the sun for a period of time and your vitamin D status is fine, it's going to downregulate or depress the vitamin D production in the body. So you will not get a toxicity from being exposed to sunlight. What about this description and toxicity? Excess supplemental intake of this nutrient can oppose the effects of anti-clotting medication. What is the vitamin toxicity? Vitamin K is the answer, because if you remember, vitamin K is involved in blood clotting proteins. So if you are on a medication, you're trying to prevent clotting, then taking a supplement of vitamin K in excess may potentially oppose it. So someone who is on an anti-clotting medication, they're likely going to put them on a vitamin K supplement, which might sound counterintuitive, but they put it at they monitor it very closely, and it's at a level that is going to allow the person to have enough, but also won't prevent or counteract the effects of the medication. If you have any questions on the fat-soluble vitamins, thinking about food sources, deficiency symptoms, or toxicity symptoms, definitely let me or the TAs know.